So thank you very much to everyone. So nice to see you all here. I know, people are, as Tonya was saying, different time zones, different parts of the world. So it's so good to, to see you here. It's so amazing to have these technologies that enable us to connect across borders in a time where borders are so violent and deadly, but also we have, technology in spaces where we're able to connect and be together and share some important moments and reflections across continents and countries. So, that's really something, that's really amazing. So my name is Francesca Esposito. I'm the new president of the ECPA, the European Community Psychology Association. And this is the first webinar series of our joint ECPA-SCRA webinar series. The idea of this series, as I was mentioning before, is to bring in conversation scholars that are doing important work and who are based in the US together with scholars who are doing, similar kind of work in a similar area based in Europe, and to kind of have conversations around important topics, societal challenges, in order for us to learn and build our capacity to respond to all the challenges around us. We're living in a very difficult moment where violence seems to be increasing on all sides. So I think these are moments where we can try to come together and learn, and then get some inspiration to then go back to our local context and try to keep on doing the important work we're doing, and try to do to continue and build even more capacity to do this important transformative work. So thank you for being here. Thank you also. I see some of my students, our students here. I'm so glad to see them. So without any further ado, I will introduce our speakers, amazing speakers for this first webinar. I'm very, very, very pleased to have. It's a long time that I have been, planning to have this webinar, because I think it's such an important topic, and the two scholars and community activists that are here with us are doing really groundbreaking work, important transformative work in their different contexts, and the work was also been acknowledged as of global importance through very important awards and different forms of recognitions. So today's speakers, I will start with Dr. Christopher Beasley. Chris is an assistant professor at the University of Washington, Tacoma, where he studies transitions from prison to college, leads the development of the ASCII post-prison pathways initiatives, and advises the formerly incarcerated student association, and builds a post-prison community across the University of Washington Tacoma system. His scholarly work emphasizes the possibilities incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people imagine for themselves, influences on these possibilities, and how they alter life courses. Chris has also spoken extensively about the role of people with lived expertise in the creation of social changes and ways to realize this potential. He's invested in this scholarship because of their own transition from prisoner to social change agent and scholar. Thank you so much, Chris, to be with us. It's really an honor, and I'm so happy and glad that you accepted this invitation.
An honor to be here. Thank you.
And I'll introduce our second speaker. That is Dr. Aresti, also known as Andear, from the University of Westminster, London, and is a senior lecturer in criminology at the School of Social Sciences at the University of Westminster. He's one of the 3 founder members of the British Convict Criminology and has played a leading role in the development of the convict criminology perspective in the UK, also forming the Convict Criminology at Westminster Research Group, of which I have the honor to be part of. Andy's work challenges current misrepresentations of crime, prisons, and former convicts. He runs 3 prison to university pipeline projects at prisons in England and has helped others, both in the UK and overseas, to start similar projects. Dr. Aresti and Dr. Sasha Dark were recently awarded the 2023 John Irwin Distinguished Scholar Award for their outstanding professional contributions to the study of convict criminology. Thank you so much, Andy, for being with us.
Thank you.
I'm so glad to have you, your colleague,
Don't lie.
friend, and
You're such a liar, Francesca. She doesn't really want me here. Do you? Not really. Come on, be honest.
So now, without further ado, I I already spoke a lot. As I said, today's webinar is entitled Prison to University Pipelines, Experiences, Challenges, and Future Avenues of Research and Transformative Action. And I think the overall idea, as rates of incarceration continue to increase and calls for abolition and alternative justice systems are resonating around the world, I think the idea of this webinar is to try to shed light on the complex reality of incarceration, the lived experiences of those targeted by this harmful system, and the role of higher education settings in promoting transformative change and social justice. So, I think some of the conversation will concern the access of imprisoned people to higher education, the development of prison to university pipelines as a way to challenge the violence of incarceration. And we will learn from both Chris and Andy about the important work they have been doing and how we can, build on this work and develop other initiatives in our context. Thank you so much. So I will leave the floor. I don't know who want to start. Maybe Chris, you want to go first?
I don't see a screen share option here. Andy, maybe if you could get going and then I could follow up if you don't mind.
Sorry?
Would you mind starting first, Andy? I don't see a screen share option, so just while we get this straightened out.
Have you got the slides then, Francesca?
I think so. Amagan, have you been able, your Prussia to...
Yes, I have already downloaded, but maybe Prussia, can you share your screen?
Also, while we're uploading the slides, I cannot mention, and sorry, apologies about that, that Prussia and Armagan, who are here, who are 2 collaborators, new collaborators of the ECPA, have been working with me to organize this webinar. They have been amazing, have done, much of the work has been them doing it. So yeah, just to acknowledge their contribution for allow this webinar to happen. So thank you so much to both of you.
Cool.
Thank you.
So,
and I see the screen share option on my screen now. I can get started if that works.
Okay, if you want to. I still can't see it. Where is it? But you can go first. I don't mind. Up to you, Chris. You decide.
Yeah, if you found the screen share option,
okay.
So maybe in the meantime, Andy will download your slides and make sure we can upload them.
I broke my glasses. So.
Is this showing okay on everyone's screen here?
Yeah, all good.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. So as you heard earlier, I'm Chris Beasley at the University of Washington on the Tacoma campus. In addition to my academic work, I do work in the community, especially around supporting transitions from prison to college, both at the individual level, developing communities and programs to help support people, and then also engagement in various different policy work. I do this work in the United States because the exponential growth that we've seen, people have probably, even people probably in Europe probably know that mass incarceration is sort of like an epidemic in the United States. It started in the 1980s. We saw exponential growth and still have mass incarceration to this day, although certainly starting to chip away at that. I also do this work because of the large inequity in higher education. We look at people in the United States in general, we see that about 29% have a bachelor's degree in the United States, and that compares to about 4% of formerly incarcerated people. When we look at the intersection of incarceration and ethnicity, we see even more glaring disparities. For example, 3% of formerly incarcerated Black men have a bachelor's degree, and when we look at the intersection with gender, we see an even more glaring disparities, with only 1% of formerly incarcerated Latinas having a bachelor's degree. Also do this work probably even more meaningfully to me because of my own experiences, having grown up without really thinking of college and careers as a possibility, and not really realizing that until after I got out of college, or after I got out of prison, somehow ended up in college and started learning more about the world and my own potential, and really seeing different career pathways as possible in my life. Through that, I was able to start developing communities of formerly incarcerated folks and really see the impact that formerly incarcerated folks were having on the world, and how we were having an impact on the world, and just wanting to invest in the potential of others, so that not only they could have a life that was more fulfilling, but also so that we could be a stronger society with their impact on the world. There's two models of change that I'll talk about today that I've developed through both my scholarly work and my community work. The framework that I work from is usually to be engaged in the community, to first see how things are operating in the community, and then turn to the literature to find theories and concepts that seem to fit with what I'm observing in the world, to perhaps expand on those theories and concepts based on the community work, but also to expand on the community work based on the theoretical work. So in a sense, I'm translating the language and the theories and concepts of those two worlds, synthesizing it, and then hopefully adding value to both the scholarship and the community work. From the community psychology side of things, I operate from a third order change framework. We often talk about second order change, but in some of the same literature of second order change, there's also the idea of third order change. These orders of change differ based on their assumptions of cause and effect. And most of this comes from organizational change, but some of it from community change as well. As we know from community psychology, first order change is schematically concordant, right? So it fits with our existing schemas. First order change is change that fits with our existing ideas of how the world operates, how problems, what the causes of problems are, and therefore what the solutions of problems are, right? So first order change is very incremental change that fits with our existing understanding of causes and problems, and therefore solutions. Second order change introduces a new way of looking at a problem, and therefore new solutions to that problem, right? So it's thought of as disruptive change, as innovative change. However, one of the limitations of second order change is that it's often scholars like ourselves, experts like ourselves, coming into communities and saying, like, here's a different way of looking at things, or different power structures perhaps emerging in a community that are looking at things in different ways. One of the challenges with second order change is that it often also becomes entrenched in the power structures. Like as this new way of looking at things gains power, it often becomes entrenched, and perhaps the cause of a problem starts to change. It might see like a similar symptom, but perhaps a different cause of that symptom changes over time. And we can see a similar problem that we saw before, in which we're still operating from an old way of looking at things, and so it's hard to introduce new solutions to the problem. One way around that is to operate from third order change. Much of the literature on that treats it as aschematic, so it's looking at a problem without a particular schema, without a particular mental framework. I don't know that I'm totally convinced right now that communities and organizations can operate aschematically. I think there are generally frameworks that communities work from, frameworks that organizations work from. I think that, and some of the literature in third order change talks about it like this, that we can create flexible and adaptable systems, flexible and adaptable communities, flexible and adaptable organizations so that new paradigms are continually flowing through the community, flowing through the organization, flowing through the society, if you will. So that allows new ways of looking at things, new mental frameworks to continually flow through as perhaps the cause of the symptom changes over time. So that's the sort of framework I look at things from. I'm not going to go through this entire slide. I just want to give an overview of this and show this as an example of how I'm thinking about third order change. In higher education during and after prison, I'm looking at the individual, structural, and ideological levels of how we can create flexible and adaptable systems in which people with lived expertise are continually coming through that system. The reason why that I'm developing a framework like this is because of the advantage of people with lived expertise. When we talk about paradigms, oftentimes the holders of those paradigms, the people who maintain those paradigms, are the experts in the field, right? We have people in colleges and universities who pass along paradigms or ways of thinking from one generation to the next. We have professionals who are often trained in those paradigms, and they operate from those paradigms that are being passed from generation to generation. And so, although new ideas can be developed, difficult to think outside of the framework in which you were trained in, right? We're going to think a little bit outside of that, but to think different from the frameworks that you're trained in, that's a difficult task. Expertise are developing their initial views on the problem and its causes from their experiences. And certainly there are biases and there are problems with that type of knowledge too. But what it does allow is for a fundamentally different way of looking at a cause. Certainly also influences how that knowledge is developed, but it allows a more distal perspective on that particular problem and possibly solutions to that. So the framework I operate, change framework, and I'm looking at individual, structural, and ideological ways of nurturing that expertise of people with lived experience. I look at things like, how do we sort of nurture individuals, their social political development, their own schemas and what they think is possible for themselves, their capacity to act and reflect on what they're doing, creating opportunities for people and making sure that they can seize those opportunities and their sort of capacity for reflexivity. At the structural level, looking at things like, how do we create organizations, how do we create community structures so that people with lived expertise can gain this individual capacity so that they can rise through systems of power, and so that their voice and their agency can be exposed to the world, and that they can sort of act agentically in the world. That's what I think about in the structural level, those communities, those organizations, et cetera. From an ideological level, I look at how narratives and culture are being formed and how they're being changed to allow for that voice and an agency to have a meaningful impact on the world, right? Like we can create all the systems and structures that we want for people to gain the expertise, to gain the agentic power, to maybe operate within to maybe operate logistically within systems, but there's a culture that people would still push against, and culture is very powerful in that way. Also, culture can magnify that agency and that logistical power, if you will. So I look at things like narratives and changing stereotypes, changing schemas, looking at developing a culture for the value of lived expertise, and a culture that welcomes challenges to dominant paradigms that often sort of soften the landscape so that paradigm change becomes easier. If people with lived expertise are walking into a culture that values flexibility and adaptability and challenges to ways of thinking, they're going to be able to have more of an impact. Also a culture of allyship, so that people with lived expertise aren't working alone, but there's a culture already there so that people welcome support for people with lived expertise and know how to provide that support in a way that maintains agency. So I won't go into any more detail on that, but wanted to provide that overall framework there. At the more individual level, I operate from a self-transformation model based on possible selves, some learning theory, some desistance theory, and some other social, psychological, and educational theories. I'm not going to walk through the model here, but just cover a few highlights here. This is a model of the transformation process of people's own individual mental frameworks, right? And so I think part of the liberation process is breaking free of what's in our head about what's possible for ourselves. And the literature certainly supports this as well. Much of this literature actually comes from incarcerated youth and working with incarcerated youth. It's based on the idea that our self-concept is flexible and adaptable, that it changes over time. It's dynamic in that way, that our self that we have today our self-concept today isn't exactly the same self-concept we had 10 years ago, and it won't be the same self-concept that we have 10 years from now. So that's the self-schemata here. And as we know, self-schemata are schemas that we have about ourselves are based on our experiences in the world, just like any other schemas that we have. Like we have a schema for birds, right? And so we have a mental model of what a bird is. If I say, hey, look, there's a bird, you have a direction that you're probably looking. Also in your mind, you have an idea of what that bird looks like, perhaps. And I say, well, what happens if you walk up to that bird? And you imagine not only its current state, but its future state, right? So you have this schema about what birds are. Well, we have these same schema, and that schema about birds was developed through your experiences in the world, reading stories, hearing from around you about what birds are like, encountering birds, right? You take all that information, develop a schema for birds. Well, our self schemas are similar in that way. Exposure to different information in the world and different stories and encountering people, etc., helps us develop a schema about certain groups of people, including ourselves. If we were to become incarcerated, we start to apply that schema about incarcerated and formerly incarcerated to ourselves, because we already have that schema about incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people. The schema includes both the current and the future state, right? What are we like right now, and what are our possibilities for the future? We have both negative, or both feared and desired possibilities. So we have these things that we desire in the future and things that we fear in the future. We're motivated, it's goal-directed motivational theory. We're motivated to pursue those things we desire and to avoid those things that we fear. And that's part of how we move through the world, if you will. And that motivation leads us to different experiences in the world. So in many ways, the possibilities that we imagine for ourselves constrain our act in the world through that goal-directed motivation. But there are ways to expand those possibilities by introducing people, for example, to different cultural messages, to different experiences, to different social models. Just like when you experience probably like a penguin for the first time, and you're like, the hell is this? That doesn't fit with my existing schema of what a bird is. And so now I have to go through this learning process of assimilation, of accommodation. I have to adjust my existing schema to make sense of the new information, right? So we can use what we know from learning theory and from schema development to expand these possibilities by disrupting schemas, for example, by introducing people to new information that they hadn't been exposed to before and new experiences that they haven't been exposed to before. So what I would argue in this model is that as those possibilities get expanded, goal-directed motivation kicks in. If there are strategies and opportunities to engage, to act on that new motivation, it can lead to new experiences. Those new experiences introduce people to new information about themselves. There's an assimilation and an accommodation and an identity exploration process that's happening during those new experiences. That allows possibilities to be expanded even further. So this is kind of, if you notice, there's a backwards facing arrow right here, because it's a cyclical process, these possible selves. as we become inspired and engage in new experiences and assimilate and accommodate, that expands the self schemata, and that allows new possibilities to emerge as our self becomes expanded. And then we have new motivation, new experiences that we assimilate and accommodate and explore identity, further expand ourself. That allows even more distal possible selves to emerge. So it's this process through which we're continually imagining further distal possibilities and moving toward. And what I would argue is that as we move toward them, we become to self-actualize. We become to reach our fuller and fuller potential. From a desistance framework, we might say that we become different enough that our self is no longer concordant with a life of crime, if you will. It's now discordant with a life of crime. I'm less interested in the desistance part of this and more interested in the self-transformation and the self-actualization part of this. There's various work that I've done in the community to learn about and develop these models and synthesize them with the academic scholarship. One has been the formerly incarcerated college graduates network. This is a network of about 1,500 of us, 40 in the world, mostly in the United States. We're in 4 out of the states in the United States, and then we have members from 10 other countries around the world. Also through Unlock Higher Education, which is a public policy advocacy organization in the United States that's led by formerly incarcerated folks and primarily comprised of formerly incarcerated folks, but also with allies. In the United States, you may have heard that we now have Pell Grant eligibility for people incarcerated. So that's a federal system through which people can get funding for their undergraduate education. At one time, incarcerated people were ineligible for that. It was actually taken away from incarcerated people in the United States. The universities started leaving the prison system when that happened because there was no funding available. However, Unlock Higher Education spearheaded the advocacy efforts to reinstate Pell Grants, which are now reinstated. So we're now seeing universities come back into the carceral system. I'm also involved in the Rise Up conference, which is a conference led by incarcerated and formerly incarcerated folks to really highlight the scholarship of incarcerated and formerly incarcerated folks. UW Husky Post-Prison Pathways, which is an initiative at the University of Washington on the Tacoma campus to support pathways from prison to college, as well as inspire possibilities. And then from prison cells to PhD, which is a mentoring program across the United States to support formerly incarcerated folks in their pursuit of careers, regardless of what the scope of that career might be, if it's a PhD or something else. But I can talk later in Q&A about any of the individual structural or ideological ways in which this work has been sort of contributing to the liberation of incarcerated and formerly incarcerated folks. But they're all done in ways that especially start to transform the narrative about incarcerated and formerly incarcerated folks, both the public narrative that others see, but also our own internalized schemas. So changing both the stereotypes through narrative and changing our own internal schemas through exposure to those similar narratives. Doing work at the public policy level to provide structural opportunities, and then creating systems and structures that allow the scholarship of incarcerated and formerly incarcerated folks to come to the surface, doing cultural work to highlight the importance of formerly incarcerated folks being in leadership opportunities. We've seen a lot of success in the United States on that, starting with staff level staff positions and sort of creating a culture in which there was an expectation for formerly incarcerated folks to have that, and then expanding that into more leadership positions, and then more recently, but having a pretty big impact is at the foundation level, the funding level, and making sure that the funders are on board with that culture and also wanting to invest in the leadership of formerly incarcerated folks. And that's really put a lot of pressure on organizations to have formerly incarcerated leaders here. But sort of we're operating at those different levels. I do want to say that much of this is philosophical and theoretical postulating. These models that I'm working from are community grounded, and there's empirical support for them in various different spaces, not necessarily in the prison and post-prison higher education space. So I am adapting those and modifying those models and combining those models. They haven't been subjected to an empirical model test of the entire model applied to this particular situation. So I just want to sort of ground it in that limitation there. My goals are to synthesize this practical, scholarly, and grounded knowledges across different spaces, to develop and test more intentional and systemic social and personal interventions, operating from a social experimentation framework. And then, so not waiting to use this knowledge, not waiting for the empirical evidence of a unified model, but resting more on the social experimentation framework, and also continually getting feedback from the community as I use these frameworks. So with that, are we doing Q&A after, or saving that for the end? I assume saving.
Thank you so much, Chris. I mean, that was amazing. Yeah, I would say that maybe we now go to Andy, and then, yeah, we open, a conversation at the end so that we can, because I imagine some points will be touched upon by both of you. So it might be interesting then to kind of see some common themes and discuss the different models, and thank you so much. So Armagan, Prasha, can one of you please upload Andy's slides?
I found my share screen. If not, it's up to you.
You found? Okay, if you found, so go ahead. So you also know when you want to kind of change your slides.
Yeah, let me come out of here for a minute. One sec.
Maybe Chris should stop.
Unless, if you can do it, it would be good, but because I can't. Oh, hold up.
Yeah, Chris, do you have do you have to kind of some sort of strict time frames and schedules that you have to leave the webinar? What's your?
No, I have space.
Okay, because I'm conscious that it's 9 a.m. So I don't know if you, if you have teaching or other, commitments. So yeah. Usually, I think the webinars last in between 1 hour and a half up to 2 hours, depending on like how much the conversation is engaging. But yeah, let's see. And obviously, if at some point you have to, to go, and just let us know. So Andy, are you ready?
Yeah, one sec. I've got so many things open on my PC. I don't want to show you everything because some of it might be incriminating, you see. So, we don't want to go down that road. Can you see it?
Yeah, we can see it. Can you put it in like,
slideshow?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, here it goes. You see? You're not such a boomer as I thought you'd be.
I'm not such a what?
A boomer.
No, well, exactly. Hi, everyone. So how long am I talking for? Because I can talk forever, Francesca.
I would say, in between 20-30 minutes maximum, up to half an hour, I would say, which is
I'll tell you what, I'll do around, like Chris, I'll do around 20 minutes or so, and then people, if they've got any questions or if they've fallen asleep, we can wake them up after, okay? So,
sure.
Okay, so mine's going to be a bit different to Chris's because obviously what we do here is very specific and very sort of unique to a particular criminological perspective, a critical criminological perspective, which is convict criminology. And all our work, our prison to university partnership projects are rooted or contextualized within convict criminology. So I'm going to talk a bit about our projects, a bit about convict criminology, bore you with a bit about me, not in any particular order. We'll see how it goes, because I'm quite chaotic, as Francesca knows. So let's start with this. This is Pentonville Prison, which we were in there yesterday with Sasha and Francesca for one of our prison projects. It was a graduation of the one of our prison projects, one of the modules we run in Pentonville. So I'm going to give you a bit of context about Pentonville and about my interest in these sort of prison university partnerships and lived experience. So I was here a very long time ago, and I was doing higher education, and I started there, and then eventually I came out of prison, went straight into university about a month after I left prison in, I'm not going to tell you the date because then you'll see how really old I am. I'm nearly as old as that picture on the far right, which is Pentonville in 1842. So I came out of Pentonville in 1842. No. So I came out of prison and went to university about a month later. Here was me, happy. I was so excited. And as soon as I started getting closer to the gate, I remember the day vividly. It was a bright sunny day. The sky was blue, and I was sort of just come out of prison, like I said, a month ago, walking into university, and I thought, shit, oh my God, really? Really, what am I doing here? Me, someone that comes from a different type of background, you know, involved in crime and been to prison, you know, this, that, and the other. I you know, when I say I was more comfortable, that's a nice way of saying it. I mean, I was like crapping myself, which basically means, you know, pooing myself, really. So, you know, I really didn't know what to expect. I really felt out of my comfort zone. Prison I could handle, you know, my sort of people, my sort of environment. So I'm in university, and I'm, you know, hardly anyone knew I was from prison. I mean, why would I tell them? I'm studying psychology, which I've really got an issue with psychology, and I will tell you about that after. So I'm studying psychology, not telling anyone, thinking, am I even going to pass? Am I going to get through this? I wish I was back in prison, you know, stupidly, but you're sort of thinking all these things, you know. And then I did really well on the degree, came out, but then I did a master's in cognitive neuropsychology, same sort of thing again. No one knows. And I was sort of, for a long time, I thought I was the only one that had come from prison and went to university. How unique am I? Look at me. I'm the only person. But obviously there's lots of us out there, right? But at that time, maybe because I was in psychology, I didn't know, right? So at some point for a long time, I was thinking, this can't be right. There must be other people out there, and we should connect. We should connect, because we should share our experiences and have someone to talk to about these negative experiences that could hinder, like Chris says, right, could prevent us from sort of reaching our potential, our academic potential and personal transformation. So that's when I met Sasha. Our daughters were at a nursery together over in Southwest London, where we were, and we started talking about it. And basically that's the backdrop, and that's the context for everything, except for one thing: psychology. So here's me happily going through psychology, wanting to be a clinical psychologist, right? And because I'd been to prison, because I've got previous convictions for whatever, you know, violent related offences, you know, adult on adult, that typical masculine sort of thing, I couldn't become a clinical psychologist. And I went to the BPS, who were the British Psychological Society, like our governing organisation over here, a bit like the American Psychological Association, etc. And they're like, oh, we don't take a view on this, nothing to do with us. And I thought, what? Are you serious? Psychology? I thought you're there to help people. I mean, seriously. So the combination of the being alone through this process and the stigma of, you know, not being able to do what you want to do was sort of the backdrop for what I'm going to tell you about now, which is, don't worry about that. We know UK's got one of the biggest prison populations in Europe, but it was this. So me and Sasha got together, and then we met someone called Rodder later, and we sort of started this sort of network called Convict Criminology, which came over from the States. Because what we were arguing was that, you know, we've had this lived experience of prison and that, and a lot of the stuff that we read around prisons and this, that, and the other. And remember, I'm shifting into criminology here because I'm really pissed off with psychology now. Although, let me tell you, criminology is equally as bad. So again, I'm alone. There's no one there for me. I'm joking. They're both all right. So So we developed this sort of net convict criminology network, which is an academic group that challenges well, misrepresentations of crime, the criminal justice system of prison. I mean, what is prison like, you know? And I'm not saying you have to have had an experience of prison to understand what prison's like, but, you know, having been to prison, you do know about a prison. And a lot of the academic sort of literature doesn't reflect the lived realities of prison, okay? So that's the sort of context for the group and the projects, basically. And one of the biggest, you know, as critical criminologists and psychologists would argue this as well, you know, who's in the position, who's in the powerful position to produce the knowledge, and what type of knowledge are they producing, you know, and is that knowledge conducive to the lived experience of the people that they're trying to represent? So, you know, these are sort of some epistemological, methodological sort of things that we consider. So anyway, this is convict criminology. I'm not going to bore you with it. Basically, a network of critical criminologists, some with lived experience, some that are, you know, are just justice impacted. You don't have to go to prison to be part of the group. It's not like that. There's no hierarchies. We've all got something critical and relevant to say, in my view. So, okay, a bit more about convict criminology here. What we're trying to do here is privilege the prisoner's voice. Okay, this is what we're trying to do. If you want to know what's going on in prisons at this moment in time, then speak to the people that are living it. And I was in prison, like I said, 1842, so a very long time ago, right? So I was in prison maybe 23 years ago, 1998, I left prison. Even me, you know, I do go back into prison, so I know what that experience is like, but it's sort of a bit more attenuated. It's not as, you know, and what issues are going on in prison now? How do we know about them? Well, going to prison now, and the guys inside, the people inside, the folk inside, will tell you what it's like. So what we try and do here is privilege the prisoner's voice. But how do you privilege a prisoner's voice when you've got all these structural barriers? What are the structural barriers, as Chris said? What are the structural barriers? Well, it's the state. I mean, we're quite anti-state, although we have to play the dance with the state as well to get into the prisons. But, you know, the state are preventing us from getting in. So, you know, we get in through our projects and this, that, and the other. And, you know, I'm going to outline what we do in the projects, and then you can see how this fits in with what I'm talking about here. Okay, but the fundamental thing here is that, one, we're trying to privilege the perspective of those people that are living in prison at the moment, and those people that have left prison. And also what we're trying to do with convict criminology is get people into criminology, into academic positions like where I am now, you know, as a PhD in that, so we can change the face of criminology and provide a more authentic criminology that's led by people that have been justice impacted, lived experience of prison, not relying on people that are getting the sort of research funding at Ivy League institutions that are in bed with the state. I mean, this is what I'm arguing. And sorry, but I'm a critical criminologist and a critical psychologist, but I'll criticize them after. Right? So anyway, so how did this start? So we first started, we brought convict criminology over in early 2010 or 11, around that sort of time, with Sasha, Dark and Rodell. And then since then, we started developing our own stuff here at Westminster, at our university. So we started off with a mentoring scheme, and then we sort of shifted into our prison projects. We've got 3. First one started in that prison that I showed you earlier, HMP Pentonville, which is where I served the first 9 months of my prison sentence before moving to another prison. So for me to go back into a prison to deliver a participatory HE project where we take the students in and they study with serving prisoners is an excellent thing, right? For the people to see someone that's been in their own shoes there delivering the modules. So me and Sasha deliver it. So we started our first prison project there. Then we got another prison project going at HMP Grendon, which is a C category prison, a training prison. You've got people that are serving much longer sentences there. And then we shifted over to Coldingley now. Now, all these 3 projects, I'm going to show you some pictures in a minute, but all these 3 projects are accredited prison to university pipeline projects at undergraduate level for Pentonville and at master's level for Grendon and HMP Coldingley. Okay. And from those projects, this is the prisoner to university pipeline. We have people that have come off those projects that have come to do masters with us and have come to do PhDs with us. So we've got people that are doing PhDs here that were in prison, coming from open prison, doing their PhD. We've still got one guy that's still in prison doing his PhD. So this is how our pipeline projects work. We get people onto the projects, they come through the projects, and we try and take them through the academic trajectory. And the whole point here for me is that we're giving them what I didn't have. We're giving them that support, that, you know, that confidence and that nurturing to build them up into academics, that, you know, and to get into these positions. So we've also got the CC at Westminster Research Group, where we have all these people that are on these modules, not the prisoners, obviously, but the guys that are coming from, well, they're still prisoners, but guys coming from prison, or some of our other research students, and they're all involved in this research group. So it's quite a big sort of, we've got quite a lot of things going on here. So we know, as Chris will tell you, as I will tell you, as many others will tell you, transformational potential of higher education. As someone that has come through the system, you could give me a really good job, and you could give me the 5-bedroom house with a luxury swimming pool and a sauna. Actually, I would take that, but you could give me all these other things, but the most important thing to get me out of crime was higher education, in terms of shifting out of that criminogenic environment, in terms of, you know, developing a new identity, in developing confidence in my skills as an academic. A lot of people that, you know, are in prison hated school. I was always, you know, skiving, you know, bunking away from school and that. So to come back into an academic environment, you know, it takes a lot, number one, but number two, to have support around you is instrumental. But the most important point for me, well, they're all important, but the importance here is the sense of achievement and self-identity, you know, the change in your identity and how you can progress through this. Arguably, you're probably thinking, really, is he an academic? He talks like a former prisoner. So forget this. So the projects, first project, HMP Pentonville. Here you've got the undergraduate program, where we take our students in and they study with serving prisoners. That's the first project at undergraduate level. Bit of artwork by one of our prisoners. This is in central London, this prison. Just a bit about the prison, I won't bore you with that, but about the module. It's a 20-credit module. Well, maybe I'll bore you about a bit. But if you look at the syllabus here, or the schedule for the lectures, Introduction to Criminology. What is criminology? Who better to talk about criminology than people that have got the vast experience of being involved in crime in the criminal justice system? Actually, the beauty of these sort of projects, being that they're very criminologically focused, is the fact that there's no hierarchy, because our students come in with the academic and theoretical knowledge. However, the guys inside, and unfortunately we haven't got into women's prison yet, but the guys inside come in with the lived experience. So if you want to know about prisons, the pains of, look at number 4, prison life, the pains of imprisonment, well, who better to ask than someone in prison? All of those topics anyway. So you can see that there's no hierarchies here. There is a combination of, you know, the outside students coming in with the academic, theoretical, empirical sort of understanding, and the guides inside with the lived experience knowledge and that. So Grendon is the next prison to university pipeline project that we got. Now, what we're doing here with the Grendon guys, like I said, it's all males. We started writing academic papers, because a lot of these are doing degrees or they've done degrees. So there's quite equal in terms of the academic level, in terms of the students that come in from our university. So they've started, you know, we started writing papers with them. Okay, how are we going to get out the message about what's going on in prison? Well, let's write about it, and let's publish research articles, and let's tell the truth about what's going on in prison, and not rely on what the Ministry of Justice or other people that are more sort of in bed with the state are telling us about what's really going on in prison. So this is where we're at the moment with Grendon. And then we've got HMP Coldenley, which is even a higher level. So Grendon and Coldenley, more so, a lot of them, these guys are doing masters, and some of them want to start PhDs with us soon as well. And again, we're doing the same thing. We're sort of writing policy papers with them and things like that. So you can see this is not just about going into prison and doing education. Part of it is, and it's about helping people develop their educational and personal trajectories, but it's also about doing activism as well. You know, we can't fight the state out there on the streets, so let's fight them through the publications and the writing that we do. That's what we're doing here. So we've taken our models to Brazil. I thought I'd just get the picture of Brazil in there. You can see Sasha and me somewhere in these photos. We've taken it to, well, a couple of Sao Paulo's in Brazil as well. But we've also got connections with Buenos Aires where we've taken our projects, and you can see us sitting in there in the class. And what we're trying to do there is, every time when we're working internationally, is trying to get this sort of lived experience perspective, this convict criminology perspective, sort of, well, develop the network so it's wider, because it started off in the States, and it's sort of, in fairness, it stayed stagnant in the States, and then we started to internationalize this sort of convict criminology lived experience perspective, and we're sort of, well, world domination maybe, hey, who knows? So that's where we are there, and now we're developing our network. Sorry, I'm just checking the time. Yeah, I'll stop in a minute. Now we're developing our European networks and trying to have a European observation group or network for all these prison projects. So we've got connections with Milan, we've got connections with other European, Berlin and Portugal, hopefully soon. Maria, I saw you there in the audience, and Francesca, and some of the other European countries. So we can develop these projects and be supportive of each other, maybe do some work together, etc., etc. So I think, and what we're doing now at the moment in our research group, we've got a couple of things, because there's a couple, and I'm going to end on this. No, actually, I'm not. I'm going to end on something else, but I'll come to this. Two things that have happened. Our projects have hit a brick wall because of something that happened in 2019 at London Bridge, where someone killed a couple of people on one of these projects. If you Google 2019 Fishmongers Hall, you'll get the story. Anyway, it wasn't directly related to these projects, but what happened was the government and the Ministry of Justice stopped all our students going in to do these projects. So we're like, hold up. You stop the projects, or we go in, but students don't. Well, you haven't told us anything about it, so let's challenge this. So you see the second study there. That's what we're looking at: investigating policies and risk management procedures preventing university students from participating in higher education projects. Now, remember, some of our research group have got lived experience or coming from prison, so we're doing this together. And another one is just looking at something equally important, I think, is that what is that transitional experience like, which was Chris was talking about. What is that transitional experience like coming from an open prison to study at a university? I did it at college. I was coming, and it's quite a weird, and we don't know much about it. So these are two of the many projects that we were doing. And just to end on this, we had the first, I think, according to Sasha, he told me it was the first. He might be lying, but I'm sure he's right. We had the first international convict criminology prison to university partnership, pipeline project partnership symposium, where we did it in over 4 days. Day one was in one of our prisons, day two in one of the other prisons, and day three in one of the other prisons, and the last day was at the uni. And we had people coming over from the USA, from Brazil, from Argentina, from Europe, and that was, you know, bringing the projects together. And we had virtual people coming in virtually from Brazilian prisons, and Argentina as well. So, you know, I think we're doing quite a lot of stuff in terms of these projects and trying to sort of, you know, do some good out there, basically. And I think I'll just leave it there, because I know I've been talking for ages. And Francesca knew I would anyway. But anyway, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy. That's great. Would you like to just take off
Get rid
the
of my slides?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
If
you
I
so much.
can,
That
right?
was amazing.
I'll stop share. There you go. Okay.
Yeah. So maybe what I'll say now, we open the Q&A. Maybe I can stop the recording so we can, you know, speak freely without any kind of barrier. So, yeah.